Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Games Talk Show. I'm your host, Karan Ganesh, and in today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Leanne Loombe, the head of Riot Forge at Riot Games, and an ambassador at Women in Games. I'm super excited for this interview, so without any further ado, let's jump right in. Welcome to the Games Talk Show, Leanne, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So before we get started, Leanne, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, my name is Leanne Loombe and I am the head of Riot Forge at Riot Games.
Wow, that's awesome. So if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started with the interview.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I'm really curious, Leanne, where did you start your game development journey and how did you get to become the head of Riot Forge today?
Yeah, it's been very many years. I started in QA, which I think is a great entry point for a lot of people because you find out a lot about how games are made and you get to be sort of that endpoint to play the game, make sure it's hitting quality. So that's where I started. And I worked on games such as like Risk and Scrabble. A lot of board game interpretations into video games is kind of where I started. And then I moved into QA manager and sort of moved up through the production track. So assistant producer, worked on games such as Magic the Gathering, Need for Speed, and obviously League of Legends. And that's where I am today.
Wow, that's an amazing track actually. I have heard a lot of people saying that, for producers mainly you start off as QA and then you build your way up all the way. So I think you're a great example for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as I've read, Riot Forge is a publishing label under Riot Games that helps third-party developers build the League of Legends games. So what is your role as the head of Riot Forge?
Yeah, you're right. We are the third-party publishing label for Riot Games. So we're working with a variety of different developers right now. We've already announced our first two games, Rune King, a League of Legends story, and Convergence, a League of Legends story. And my role is kind of, I would say it's threefold. The first one is really to set the strategy for Riot Forge, set the vision, the direction, so that the team know where we're going. What goals are we trying to achieve? What partnerships do we want? And then secondly, it's all about what games do we want to make? What partners do we want to work with? And really managing that portfolio of games to make sure that we're, capturing new audiences, but also really impacting our current players and giving them, something awesome in the League of Legends universe. And then lastly, it's all about managing the team, empowering them to do, what they do best. I think the interesting thing about a producer is that we don't have a set skill like engineering or artist. Those are the people that make the physical game every day, and the producer's job is really to be the glue of that team, make sure that the team is going to be the best that they possibly can and unlock them, remove all the roadblocks. So on a day-to-day basis, my job is to really make sure the team have what they need to be successful, remove any challenges, and also think more further ahead. So proactively think, okay, what are we going to be in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, and what does that look like from a strategic perspective?
Wow, yeah, I think that's a lot of thought that you have to put ahead because you would want to set the right road direction as well for the game, and I'm just really glad that's an amazing role because I'm learning to become a producer right now, and I'm like, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in as well. So that's awesome.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. So League of Legends, as we know, is a really established and a live IP as well. So what is your experience like working with such an established and live IP?
I think it's amazing every day. It actually still blows me away how many people play League of Legends. We have to sometimes, remind ourselves how many players there are. It is really quite amazing. I think the thing is that the thing I love the most is how much we can impact people with what we're doing. The League of Legends IP is massive and a lot of people are engaging in our IP, but in many different ways. So, they can play League of Legends the MOBA, they can watch esports, they can engage in our universe, through comics or books or the lore. And so there's lots of different ways to engage in League of Legends. And that for me is really exciting because we get to impact people and we get to be part of their lives in many different ways. And certainly as a producer and obviously you looking to become a producer, it's all about, bringing joy to our players' lives and making something that they they can have fun playing, that they are happy with, that, you know, I think most people making games, the best part of making games is when you release that game and you see everyone's reaction and you're like, oh my God, we made something so awesome. Everybody's so happy and having fun. And I think that's definitely something that keeps me going, especially with an IP like League of Legends, because we're impacting so many people's lives and so many people's journeys. You know, I love hearing stories about how League of Legends has brought people together, you know, from across the world. So, you know, they especially in a time like now in the pandemic and people working from home, and we can't interact with each other like we have been able to in the past, which can be really challenging, especially, you know, from mental health perspective and socializing. So I think games is a way that we can still do that in today's, you know, world that we're living in. And that is really exciting when I hear about, you know, League of Legends being the thing that's brought a group of friends together or kept them playing every week, and they've still got that social moment. And I think that's really exciting, and definitely makes me proud to be working in an IP like League of Legends.
I'm sure, I think I got a lot of information from that. Firstly was the idea of fun. Like,
Yeah,
when we develop a game, I think the most important thing that we look is for what will a player do in this and how much of fun will he have playing it. So
yeah,
I think that's really well brought out. And the other one was, especially at this time, like, games are kind of the one thing that's bringing people together. You sit at home, but then
yeah,
you're still able to connect with your friends. And I think games have really helped build that distance, or, bridge that distance between people. And
yeah.
I'm glad to be a part of this industry as well.
Me too. It honestly is amazing. Like, even myself, I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing, you know, and my sister lives in the UK, and so we didn't get to spend her birthday together. But, you know, her and all of her friends and myself just threw a party inside of Animal
Wow,
Crossing, you
that's
know,
just
just
awesome. Yeah.
it's so cool to like celebrate her birthday. And even though we're thousands of miles apart, you know, Animal Crossing was still a way for us to get together on her birthday and have fun. So for me, that's also personally just something that has been great for me during this time as well.
Yeah, I think, wow, that's one of the biggest and happiest stories I've heard as well, and that's really cool that you got to play Animal Crossing too.
I
Even though
know,
you're thousands of miles apart, it really worked out.
exactly. And my sister's friend, you know, she spent ages building a like birthday room in her house with a DJ and balloons and everything. So it was just like a perfect time, perfect moment for us to enjoy together.
That's awesome. So,
Yeah,
Leanne, I did learn recently that you love cars, and
I
you've
do.
also worked at Ghost Games, which developed the NFS title. So, what
Correct.
was your experience like working on something that you really loved back then?
Yeah, I mean, I've loved cars since I was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I've been watching Formula One since you know, I was probably that young, and have been an avid fan of Formula One ever since. I try to go to at least 3 races a year. Obviously, this year haven't been able to, but last year went to Singapore, and that was phenomenal. Seeing a night race for the first time, just, you know, amazing experience. So I love cars. I live and I breathe cars. They're a really big passion of mine. And the dream was basically came true when I got to work on Need for Speed, especially, you know, video games and cars. And I was like, oh my God, this is just the most amazing opportunity I've ever had. You know, and I made 6 Need for Speeds in total. So I was there a long time and went through, you know, lots of different titles, and really got some amazing opportunities. Honestly, I'm so grateful for Electronic Arts for, you know, giving me some of those opportunities. You know, some of the things we used to do was just so cool. For research, of course, we, you know, had to go and drive cars, and we went to events. We went to, you know, Goodwood, which is a huge festival of cars in the UK, went to Gapville, which is a drifting event in Norway. So got a ton of opportunities to be in the car scene. And, you know, Need for Speed 15 had Ken Block and Magnus Walker in it, you know, and I spent a lot of time with those guys, and it was awesome to meet, you know, people that I'd been following on social media for a long time and sort of been into what they're doing because they're so into cars, and then meeting them, you know, was obviously an amazing opportunity for me. So I loved working on Need for Speed. I loved that franchise. I think it was just, yeah, a really important part of my career. I learned a lot building those games as well.
And I think that was one of the titles that all of us played growing up, and it's one of the car titles that's really close to all of our hearts.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's really awesome that you actually got to be with the people and
Yeah,
spend time with the people, like during the race and stuff. And
yeah.
I'm glad that it worked out well for you back then as well.
Yeah, it's just so much fun. Like, making games is hard, don't get me wrong. Like, a lot of people, as you know, a lot of people are like, oh, do you just sit and make games, play games all day? And it's like, yeah, we do play games, but also making games is really hard. Anytime I think you're trying to make a creative product, and you mentioned it, trying to find the fun in a
Yeah.
game is
Hmm.
really challenging. That because it's not tangible until you play it and you try and understand, okay, what works, what doesn't work. So, and there are a lot of people involved in making a game, so it's a very complex process, and lots of pieces are involved in making a video game. So it is extremely fun. It's also a very challenging job, but in a good way.
I think in the end, the reward of people playing it and having fun is
Yes.
probably the biggest happiness that you can get out of making the
I
product.
agree. Yeah, just seeing people have fun and smile, and when we go to E3, for example, and people start playing our game for the first time, and we're there
Hmm.
on the show floor watching people, play the game for the first time, and it's just like, oh, so nervous but excited all at the same time. And launching a game is extremely, extremely satisfying.
I'm sure it must be. I'm really waiting to get to that part, some part in my future where I
Yes.
get to launch the game.
Yeah, and then you'll just be like, oh, I can do anything now. This is awesome.
Waiting for that day.
Yeah.
But Leanne, so I've read about women in games, and it was
Yes.
an initiative developed in the UK in the year 2009, and you're an ambassador as well right now.
Yeah.
So, what is your role as an ambassador at Women in Games?
Yeah, this is something I am hugely passionate about. It's definitely something I like to spend a lot of time advocating for more women to be in video games. When I first started in the industry, I was probably the only female in the whole studio. It's and the improvements I've seen over the last 15, 17 years have been amazing. Like, really happy with the progress, but we still have a lot of work to do. So that's really what being an ambassador of Women in Games is all about. It's being an advocate. It's about empowering women. It's about sharing information and experiences to encourage women to come and make video games. It's a very male orientated industry, and it still is. And sometimes it's not clear that there are actually, a variety of different jobs that you could do in the games industry. And it's all about making sure that people know that this is an option, and it's creative and it's fun. And the biggest thing is we're making games for all types of people. And if we want to make games for women and men and non-binary and all the different variety of people that are out there, we need those people making the game, because otherwise, how do what those perspectives want and need and find fun? So I think it's really important to have diversity on game development teams, especially if one of your goals is to reach a diverse amount of players. So really, the things that I focus on as ambassador is bringing women together. I do Women in Games coffee events every month, which I love because it's just an opportunity to meet. It's strangers, basically, strangers coming together and meeting and talking about our experiences and being able to give each other advice and just talk through things that you might not have that opportunity to in your development team or in your actual job. So I really love doing that. I love meeting all the different people in those events and just talking through. And the key thing for me is, back when I started in the industry, there wasn't really any female leaders for me to look up to. And I had some great mentors, don't get me wrong, but when I look back, I think if only I had someone that I could, talk to, that I could ask questions, that I could, just describe maybe a challenge that I was having or a problem I was trying to solve and just get a different perspective. And I think about how much I would have loved that when I was starting out in my career. And so now I want to provide that to people that are starting out in their career. So it's really important for me to give that and share my experience and my knowledge and help where I can, because I think it's really important to be able to have someone to to share those experiences with, and talk about challenges or problems or opportunities that you're currently looking into. So I like to do a lot of mentoring as well. I just finished mentoring in the Code Coven program, which was phenomenal. I love
I did
those
read
type
about
of,
that, yeah.
yeah, those programs are awesome because it just gives people an opportunity to come together and make games, and get mentorship from people already in the industry. So those platforms are amazing, and I love being part of that. So as a Women in Games ambassador, that's really what it's all about, is providing opportunities for mentorship, sharing my experience, sharing my advice, and ultimately just giving women a little bit more information, and encourage them to come and join us and make some more games.
I think that's been a brilliant initiative, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I've seen that, over the past few years, like you were mentioning, but when you started, it must have been different. But I've seen right now that there are a lot of more women who are interested to come up and, be
Yes.
a part of this industry. And I think that diversity is definitely one of the things that's helping out to reach even a bigger audience as well. So
Agree.
I'm really, really glad that that initiative is happening right now.
Yeah, me too. I find it extremely fun. It's something different as well. We spend all day sort of making games and solving those problems, and then I think it's just great to be able to chat to people that are in slightly different environments and doing slightly different things. And there are definitely commonalities, but there's also differences, and I think that for me is the interesting thing, just like hearing everybody's stories and being able to give a different perspective.
That's just awesomely. I'm really glad that it's working out. The
Yeah.
women in games, and I'm in my cohort as well. We have a lot of female, developers who really want to be a part of this industry, and who really want to make a difference. And I think you being an amazing leader for helping them out.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I did recently come across your talk at Develop Brighton on,
Oh, cool.
the big why and how to pitch ideas. And,
Oh, yeah.
to
Awesome.
be honest, it was an amazing talk, and it really gave me a
Mm.
good insight on how to pitch in front of different audiences.
Mhm.
So could you tell us about your experience, presenting at such significant events like Develop Brighton and then PG Connect, as well as the Games Forum?
Yeah. I've been doing it a while now, so it's not as nerve-wracking, but the first time I did it was actually GDC, so in Europe, when they still did GDC Europe. And that was extremely nerve-wracking. I remember being very, very nervous before that talk. And, the thing that drives me to do those talks is sharing knowledge, things like that, where again, having a toolbox to pull from different talks that you've seen, I think is really beneficial for people in the industry. So, and one of my core values as well is learning. I love just learning, continuing to learn. So if I can learn something and then share that with other people, that kind of amplifies that even more, and it just feels great to be able to share that experience, even if some of it might be wrong, or it's like personal, it's subjective, but it's still a different perspective that might make people think a little bit differently about maybe how they've approached it before. So nowadays I don't get as nervous, still a little bit, obviously, because you're presenting in front of a bunch of people, but I think those events are always fun. I love meeting the people that you meet there, and networking, and you just never know who you're going to meet. And I think having connections in the industry, especially the games industry, is so small. It's such a small industry. It's huge, but everybody kind of knows each other, and building up your network, I think, is a really important part of being able to, like, if you're looking for something or someone and you've got a network to pull from, that's really, really powerful. So I think going to those events is great for networking, and then also sharing experiences and knowledge. So things like how to present the big why, I've been working on that myself for like the last 15-20 years, and I'm continuing to work on it. So it's not something that you get perfect every single time. And so I've pitched ideas and games and everything to many different people. So just looking back at what I did right and what I did wrong and what feedback I've got during those points might actually help someone not make some of the same mistakes as I've made before. If they can listen to the talk and be like, oh yeah, I should definitely do that, then I think I've really helped, and that's kind of the impact that I love to have during those events.
I think, yeah, sharing the knowledge is probably one of the biggest things, because a lot of people who come to these events are usually like, okay, I want to learn how to become a
Yes.
better developer in the industry. And the other thing about networking too is really true. Like, we missed out on GDC this time, and I kind
I
of felt bummed about
know.
it. But I'm just trying to see how many people I can get to, and I feel that I've kind of like trying to do this show just to make sure I can get to a lot of people, and I think
Hmm.
that's probably one way of me connecting to others as well. But
Definitely.
I think connections is probably the one thing that works out, because, as you were mentioning, even though it's a big industry, it's a kind of small, closely tied, because
It
people kind
is.
of know each other. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I think
Yeah. I mean,
connections are something to work out.
I agree. And like you doing, this kind of show is a great way for you to build up your network as well. And, aspiring to build more games and launch your first game. I think doing something like this is phenomenal because, now you've got, people that you can contact and reach out to if you need advice or share something or a request, something from someone. So I think that can be very powerful. And I think this show is awesome as well, by the way. I think it's a great initiative that you've set up, and not everyone has the ideas, or even some people have the ideas but not the motivation or the get up and go to actually make it happen. So I think you're doing a great job there, which is awesome.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think that really, really it was an amazing compliment for it. But last question that I have for you right now
Yeah.
is, what is the advice that you would give for a student who wants to become a producer in the future?
Yeah, that one, I could probably talk about that for a couple of hours. But I think, to there's a few things that I'll talk about here. I think the first one is resumes. And one of the things I see quite frequently is that people will say, I'm a producer and an engineer and an artist, and they'll throw all of their skills into their resume. And whilst that could be beneficial, I think if you're applying for a producer job, really tailoring your resume to that producer role. So focusing in on, I'm a producer, here's the skills that I have as a producer, here's what I've done in the past that reflects, as a producer. Especially because if you're joining a team as a producer, the team want a producer. They don't want a producer and a part engineer, because there's engineers on the team already. So I think that's, definitely something to be mindful of as a producer. So be very specific in your resume and focus in on what you can do for the company rather than what you are. So I see a lot of the times people saying, I'm a great communicator, verbal, written, great communication skills. And, whilst that is a great thing to put on your resume, I prefer, or I give people the advice to just reframe that based on what you can provide to the team or the company. So a reframing of that would be, I am great at articulating a vision to the team so that they always know what direction we're heading in. That shows that you are a great communicator, but also gives an example of how you could help the team or what you could provide to the company you're applying for. So that's definitely something that I would recommend, is tailoring your resume, focusing on what you can do for the company. And then the other advice that I would give is, I think the thing about a producer's role is that we are the glue to the team. Like, we have to be passionate about empowering our teams. That's really the core skill of a producer, is making sure the team have what they need, making sure that any roadblocks are removed, making sure that they can be the best that they possibly can. In some of my talks, I talk about the producer being like a gardener. Um, they're watering the flowers, they're removing the weeds, they're making sure that the garden has everything it needs to flourish. And that's really what the producer's job is all about. We decide what that garden's going to look like and what type of flowers it needs in it, and what's the end goal, what's it going to look like, in 2 years time, once it's fully grown. And then being there to make sure that it's got everything it needs to get to that outcome. And then just how I summarize, the three core traits or core skill of a producer. So firstly, I would say, producers are all about communication. It is very, very important part of the role, making sure the team know what's going on, making sure we know where we're heading, like I was talking about, thinking ahead. the team are always very much focused on, okay, what's this sprint, what's this next milestone? So the producer should also be thinking ahead and being able to bring all of that information together and then communicate that to the team. So definitely communication. The other thing that I always piece of advice I give to producers is never assume. So that's just a really good thing to keep in the back of your mind. The producer is supposed to be sort of keeping all the balls juggling, like that's kind of our job. So just never assume that something is the way you think it is, or you assume that that's the answer to the question. As always, do the due diligence and the research and make sure you know what's going on. And then I think that's probably, the last one is don't take anything personally, because again, the producer's job is to kind of deal with the problems and the challenges and remove the roadblocks, make sure the team have what they need, get everything set up for success, deal with conflicts, and make sure there's resolutions to those conflicts. And there's a lot of putting out of fires, but also like clearing paths and making sure people have what they need. So it's just really important to not take anything personally. I mean, I think that's a good rule to have regardless of your job, but especially for a producer, because we are kind of in the fire, we're the glue, we're kind of keeping things moving. So just try not to take anything personally, and just moving forward, I think, is really important.
Wow, that's really sums it up well, and I think you've given in some amazing advice. Even, it's really like I think that resume part where you mentioned is really something that people can work on, because
Yes.
a lot of people, as you've mentioned, state that I'm really good at this, but how can that help the company? And I
Yes.
think the way that you had mentioned, maybe phrasing it in a different way could really help out everybody with that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Leanne. This has been such an amazing interview. I got to learn so much about, your
Awesome.
role, as well as so many things that happened in the industry, as well as, that contribution for women in games. I think that's an amazing initiative. I'm really glad that, more people are coming into it.
Great.
And, yeah, well,
Well,
thank you so much for being on the show again. It's really nice to
yeah,
have you.
and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great to chat to you today.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode. Make sure you guys drop a like and hit that subscribe button, because I've got a lot of amazing interviews coming up pretty soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.